on?
Hi, good evening, everybody, and it is so good to be back here with you guys. We are here for another session of Courage in Crisis, and this is being sponsored by the East and West Indies Province, the Moravian churches, and we are just here to encourage our folks out there to stay strong in this COVID season. So I am Billy Sterling Lewis. I am from the Tobago Conference. And this evening with me discussing the issue of fear, loss, and grief, I have Shanna Gill, who is also from the Tobago Conference. Shanna, just wave a little bit so
Hi.
people can see you. We are live on Facebook. We are live also on YouTube. And we have joining us from Jamaica, Reverend Nielsen Wade. Hi, Reverend Nielsen.
Hi.
Hi.
And we just want to get right into it tonight, this evening. We are on a little earlier because most of our churches have Holy Week services, and we have not interrupted that because of not being able to gather. But we are grateful that we could still come on and meet with our people this evening. So I just want to do a little check-in. We kind of started out last week with the group looking at how people were doing. Every day we see numbers escalating, we see things changing. How are you guys doing? Shana, you could start. How are you doing?
Okay, for me, in reflection of Holy Week just starting and everything, I'm just trying to stay as grounded as possible in terms of what we believe, but in
Well,
addition
I'm
to,
just not hearing me. Okay.
but in relation to COVID-19, I'm just trying as much as to stay socially responsible as possible. Right now, I'm feeling there's a little tickle in my throat. I'm trying to suppress it.
A lot of psychosomatic stuff,
I
eh?
remember, what about you? How is it in Jamaica and how are you dealing with it? Yes.
I'm okay. We're teaching online. Our classes have continued. University here at Mona will begin on the 14th again, and we're we have to devise new ways of testing since we don't want to have first face-to-face exams, so we are testing
Right.
students differently. And it has been creative and interesting. And so that's what
Right.
some of the things that we're doing. We're trying as best as we can to follow the protocols. There's a lot of different debates and discussions on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And I think that's what one of the things that brings fear to people, the uncertainty and the
Yeah.
vulnerability. So I think some of this in terms of not seeing officials and professionals being able to agree, that can create fear for some people. And I think that vulnerability, that uncertainty drives fear.
All right. Well, you got us right into the heart of it. We're going to be talking about fear, loss, and grief, like I said. So
Mhm.
you started talking about it, the uncertainty. What is this fear factor then? What is the fear factor that we're experiencing in this COVID-19 time? How will we define fear in this context? Ralph,
How do we?
how will we
Well, somebody.
define fear in this COVID?
Well, it is uncertainty. It is
Mm-hmm.
we're not sure exactly because we're hearing at one time we are seeing what is happening in Europe, and
Mm-hmm.
some people are saying, well, mainly in old people illness. Then we're hearing young people who are dying from the disease, and so there's
Mm-hmm.
that uncertainty. All the protocols that you have to follow, the social distancing and the constant washing of hands and so on, the vulnerability. Those are some of the factors that drive that create fear for some persons. The fact that you're
Right.
not able to socialize, you're not able to connect with others. There's lockdown here, there's shutdown there, and therefore the restrictions. All of those make people more vulnerable, and so these are factors which drive fear. It is not you're not normal. You're not able to do things of your custom, and I think and every day there's something different, and therefore you always have to check to see what. And one of the big ones, you're getting so many messages from everybody and from everywhere. Sometimes you don't know which to believe. And those are the factors that can cause fear.
You know, and that is so true. And the thing is, although we are all professionals in the field in one way or another, we are not exempted from those fears at all. We too are living in this fear experience, having the fear factor. So what are some of the things that people have mentioned some of it?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that people are afraid of, specifically now in this season?
Yeah, Rev really touched on a number of those things. Definitely fears of uncertainty in terms of bad news, what is going to be said next as it concerns COVID. He mentioned the elderly, and some people are afraid that the elderly will be left behind in light of COVID in terms of prioritizing younger persons. There's also fear of public stigma and ridicule, in terms of others feeling as if their status is known, people would have something negative to say. There's also, he mentioned social distancing and stuff like that. We're no longer able to socialize the way that we are accustomed to, and people they're fearing how long this might last. And there's also fear of insufficiency, and so there's panic buying and stuff like that. There's also the fear of increased job loss and stuff like that. So those are the things that people are fearing. And then there's also fear of the physical connection. When do we get to physically connect like we're accustomed to? And of course, we can't forget the fear of dying and no cure, you know, and that's a big.
Yeah.
Oh, and let me mention this. Don't let me forget. There's also the fear of another crisis arising in the midst of this pandemic. And I don't know, Billy, if you would have felt the earthquake that we had last night here in Tobago, and then there would have been an aftershock later today. And so there's a fear of that happening as well. What do we do in terms of the pandemic? And then something else arises, you know? So those are those fears that are happening on the ground.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I thought about it today. We already have the economic downturn taking place. People are losing their jobs. People can't provide for their family, and that is real fear. And then we had this earthquake, and everybody is putting up on Facebook, did you feel that? Everybody's scared. So that is taking our fear meter up a lot higher. And we can imagine what can happen to our bodies, because fear doesn't just happen in our mind, in our spirit. It affects our bodies. Our blood pressures go up. We have the fear and flight and freeze factors coming into play. What is it that's going to happen is what people are really asking at this time. But Reverend Nielsen, I want to bring you back in here to ask you about this. We are people of faith, and we are reaching out to our faith community and other persons by extension. And the Bible is clear. He says, fear not. But then we, the people of faith, are quite afraid. How do we reconcile this fearful feeling now with our faith and our command from Jesus Christ that says, do not be afraid?
And if we go right back to when Jesus walked on earth and he had his disciples, you have to say the same thing to them. They were very close to him. They saw all that he was able to do, yet the human side took over at times, and they became fearful. And so the reality is that we are human, and we will be fearful at times, even though we are commanded to fear not and to trust. There's always that, as the Apostle Paul says, that which I want to do, I find myself not doing, and that which I don't want to do, I find myself doing. So there's always that tension in terms of trusting and believing and being able to let go. And sometimes we have to be able to be honest with ourselves, acknowledge our fears for what they are, place them on the table, and then begin. If we try to pretend that they're not there, that is not going to help. Acknowledge that we are fearful, that we're uncertain, and we don't have enough faith. And then we ask for more faith. And so therefore, persons lock themselves in their houses. I'm talking to persons now who are afraid to come out of their houses. I'm going out nearly every day because I say to myself, if I allow the fear to take over my life, I will become incapacitated. And therefore, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the illness, in the disease, in the fear. And so therefore, you have to keep talking to yourself, reassure yourself, seek consolation and support from other people around you. But you still have to face. One of the best books I've ever bought is a little book with the title of the book is called Face the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
It is written by a psychologist out of New York. Face the fear and do it anyway. If you're into books, you can Google that and see if it can maybe it may be online that it may be able to help you.
All right. So I like that. Face the fear and do it anyway, because no matter what, there are no factors in life that will make us afraid in this time. And one of the things that people are really fearful of right now is the issue of loss. People are losing things left, right, and center. And we know how trauma works. Those of us who work in trauma, that we may have PTSDs coming up later, the cases of that, because people may actually, and we're praying against it, but some people may become so fearful and so anxious that they may lose their mind. Let's move into loss. This is a nice time to get into loss. We have time going, but what is it that people are experiencing with loss now in the COVID-19 period? Shana, let's just delve into that a little bit.
Yeah. So in terms of loss, what we're having a loss of our normalcy in programming and routines in our homes and our jobs, our schools, those type of environments. We are having a loss of those normal routines. We're also having a loss of our mobility, the freedom to congregate, and loss due to that mandated notice for social distancing and the amount of people that are allowed to gather together. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, we know is 5 persons, so we can't have that wide range of persons coming together. We also have our outside recreations that we love so much. So exercising, leisure activities like going to the movies, our self-care activities that we like. And even with our jobs, and therefore that will speak about our independent finances. People are losing jobs. So that's another loss that we're having. We are also losing our planned dates and deadlines. So persons would have had weddings or graduations or sporting events, different things that would have been happening not only on a personal level, but also on a social level in terms of our different societies. We're losing that. We're also losing our ability to grieve and express that grief how we normally would have. So now we have to create a new normal in terms of grieving. So in terms of funeral services, because now we're allowed to only 5 persons, the way that we would normally grieve and express that with physical connection and support, we no longer have that. So those are so many things that we're seeing coming out in terms of the losses associated with COVID.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because part of the COVID pandemic is death. A lot of people are dying. We have now 8 deaths in Trinidad and Tobago. Jamaica has had a number, Antigua has had a few, and people can no longer give the rights and the respect that we normally give as traditional people. Our death, and that is a part of us that is being taken away, and we have no control over that. There's some people who may not even get to see their loved one. I saw somebody on Facebook mention how COVID took their mom, and not being able to be there where your mom was if they were in isolation, and then they die, and they don't get much because they can't do much with the body thereafter, because they're saying the virus may still be active on the dead body. So, I mean, the loss is there, and people are actively going through that grief process. We're going to get into grief just now. Rob, can you touch on some of that for us, please?
Okay, I lost you a little bit just now. I missed. Can you give that again?
Some of the emotions that we see coming out associated with the loss, the different losses that people are experiencing in society right now, loss of freedom, loss of social activity, loss of routine. What are some of the emotions that people can expect to feel? Because we want people to know that it's okay if you feel this way. It's normal.
Yeah.
And you don't have to beat
And,
yourself up. It doesn't mean that you're less of Christ if you're having these experiences. What are some of the emotions? Go ahead.
and a big one, I think, which we need to acknowledge in our culture is anger. Anger
Mm-hmm.
expressed, and it is interesting because I just finished rewriting or updating rather my book on anger, and it was supposed to be published again this month. Anyway, it will come out when it is due to come out, when it should come out. The reality is that mentioned just now PTSD. The reality is that we will have a lot of work after the disease, after we find a vaccine, or if the disease is not as prevalent with us. We have to deal with the illness that will follow the disease, the challenges that will follow the disease. And so the PTSD stuff, the anger, the emotions that will, in terms of loss, the persons not being able to grieve as they ought to or they want to, and feeling as though that they have been abandoned, and so on. So we have to allow persons to be able to come to terms, acknowledge their feelings, whatever those feelings are, and then begin to give them some reassurance and support where they are. And so that is going to be very important when persons are able to come together again. So we will have some time. There will be a lot of memorial services,
Yeah.
allowing persons to be able to express the feelings that they were not able to express if they had attended the burial of loved ones. And
Yeah.
so we are able to acknowledge that, allow people to grieve, and allow, because now we have to suspend, because of the COVID-19, our grief process. We will grieve, but we will not grieve as we normally would.
Yeah.
And so therefore we need the prolonged grief. And so this is the challenge that we will face. And people will be doing things and behaving in ways that they would not normally do. And they will not be cognizant and conscious of why they're doing what they're doing. But the professionals will have to help them through some of those situations where persons, and that is why there have been concerns about domestic violence. There have been concerns of abuse of children, because persons will act and will allow to come to the fore feelings and expressions that sometimes will will deal with with some of the feelings that they have, but sometimes they will come out inappropriately.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I wanted to encourage people, be patient with yourself. We have to be patient with ourselves. We have to be patient with each other. We have never come this way before. Maybe somebody who was there in the Spanish plague flu time may have been here before, but we have not been here before. It's new for us. And so we have to be very aware of what we're dealing with. So Rex is talking about some of the grief issues. What is the grief cycle that we see people going through, Chanel? Just go through it in its correct way for us, please, so people can be aware of what they may be feeling.
Okay, so when we speak about the grief process, we usually look at the stages of grief, and we can also include in there the types of grief. And so I'm just going to look a little bit at that in terms of what that process look like, because we also can't forget the time period, because people grieve sometimes longer than some. But in terms of the stages of grief, we have anger. We have, and Reverend would have spoken about anger. That's something that we definitely see coming out. We also have the stages of grief that will look at bargaining. You know, some people it might be saying, you know, take back COVID, and I would do this. Take back COVID, and this would happen. Some people might going through the stage of depression. You know, when we have to deal with information like this, it's not always easy to accept that type of information. And remember, these stages don't come in any particular order. These stages could come, the anger could come today, it could recycle itself tomorrow. It don't have to come in any particular order. Then we also have denial. Some people, the stages of grief refer to denial. Some people might be in denial that a pandemic is really happening in the year 2020. And, you know, all of that is part of it. And then we also have acceptance. And that's another stage of grief. Sorry, another stage where a person just decide, you know what, this is what it is, and we have to look at a way forward. When we look at the types of grief coming in, I'll just refer to some types of grief that would come in light of COVID-19 and what we might be experiencing. And so, for example, some people will be anticipating what is going to happen next. And so we have their anticipatory grief, where, you know, we're looking at what could come next because COVID-19 is here. We also have collective grief, where us as an entire world, we're going through this process together. So that's where we would now come in. All of us are grieving similar things or the very same things. Then, of course, we spoke about persons grieving before in terms of death, and we have the issue of compounded grief in the sense that persons prior to COVID-19 would have been going through issues that they would have probably been grieving about, and COVID-19 coming in just adds to that. So on top of that, they have the issues that they would have been having before, and now it's compounded with the issue of COVID-19 and all the fears and all the losses surrounding that. So those three types of grief, you know, really, really hit home in light of COVID. Yeah.
There is that one where people are saying, why are you upset? For instance, you're not able to go to work and have your regular routine. And there is that disenfranchised grief as well, that people are saying, what are you upset for? Why are you feeling bad? You get to stay home. But people love their routine. Our routine is a part of who we are. Guys, we have just 5 minutes to be wrapping up just now. I want to just encourage all of us to be aware of what we're dealing with. What are some of the things that we want people to do at this point? Share everyone, to share this one. What are some coping strategies that we want people to employ at this point to be able to cope and manage in this time? What are some of the strategies that it could use?
All right, so Billy, we're losing you a bit there, but what I'm hearing is that you're asking what are some of these strategies, and so overall we're going to look at some of the things that we could use.
Yeah, Russia, either one.
Yeah, we're going to look at some of the things that we could employ in dealing with COVID at this time. So Rev would have mentioned it, you would have mentioned it as well, Billy. We want to be able to acknowledge what we're feeling, be able to acknowledge it, and give yourself that permission to go through the process of grieving. As Billy would have just mentioned when she spoke about disenfranchised grief, because disenfranchised means that it doesn't only relate to death, and so all the losses that we're experiencing due to COVID are relevant as well. So allow yourself that time to acknowledge what you're feeling. As well, connect as much as possible. Yes, connecting would not be as normal as we know it. So we have the social media platforms, we have telephone. We want to use those platforms for connecting. We want to be able to connect at an individual level, where we might be journaling our feelings, expressing how we are feeling. In terms of outside, we might have artistic expression, dance, you know, utilize your creativity at this time. Also circulating on social media, and I just want to point this out, here in Trinidad and Tobago, they have hotline services, and the TNT Psychological Association would have sent out a list in terms of persons to contact, as well as here in Tobago, the Tobago hotline have also put out a list of counselors that can help you through this period. And I just want to add that we have the Venezuelan population among us, and there are also persons speaking Spanish that could also treat with those as well. I also want to note develop our routines. Develop routines. Red would have said that, every morning he gets up and he go outside. We have to create new routines in light of what we used to know as normal before. So creating those new routines are definitely important. And then, of course, you want to tap into social and community resources, especially in light of persons needing financial assistance at this time. Research, find out what is out there and what is available. And lastly, what I want to add is that as Christians, you can also pray, meditate on God's word, worship, use your worship music, sing unto God. And the word of God tells us in Psalm 121 that the Lord who keepeth Israel will also keep us. All right, that's what we want to leave with you this evening.
Amen. Rob, do you want to add anything to that? How can the people of God in this time cope?
The reality is that this is stressful times, and therefore we can't allow the stress to take over our lives. So we have to develop, I've developed sense of humor, patience, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. It is okay to be vulnerable. And if you feel like crying at times, it is okay to cry. If you need support, reach out, as was said earlier. Find whatever resource that is available. Talk to some person. They may be able to help you to talk to some person else that can help you with whatever challenge you may be dealing with. Do not allow the stress to cause you to become so incapacitated that you're not used to yourself. Allow your faith to come to the fore and take care of yourself, and then laugh at yourself. Laugh sometimes. These are difficult times, and sometimes people feel that there's nothing to laugh about. Find something in the midst of it all that can bring a smile to your face, and look for somebody else that you can be assistance to. And that's one of the things that I'm looking, is important to me, take care of my physical health, my emotional health, and reach out to somebody else who I can assist as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as we help ourselves, we help each other. Guys, we are at the end of this. We better leave this verse with us. It says, have I not commanded thee? Be strong. Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed, for God, the Lord thy God is with you wherever you go. I remember Reverend Algernon said this last week. Even in the midst of this crisis, God is there. We as a faith community hold on to that, and we want to put that out there to you. Acknowledge what you're going through, your fear, your loss, your grief. Reach out to somebody, but don't forget that God is with you in the midst of it. Guys, thank you so much. And this has been another session, another conversation, as we call it, of courage in the crisis.
We're losing you there.
And as the quote so rightly says, courage is not the absence of fear, but it is the ability to triumph over it and adding the other part, knowing that there's something greater than the fear. So guys, be blessed. Have a good evening, and we will see you on Thursday. We'll see you on Thursday when we discuss another topic of anxiety, depression, and suicide. I hope you guys were hearing.